Hey guys! In today's video, we're taking you along on the next leg of our trip to Machu Picchu. We left Santa Teresa and set off for Hydroelectrica, the starting point of our trek. The taxi ride was a real adventure. Bumpy roads, steep cliffs, and potholes everywhere. But the changing landscape was absolutely stunning. As we climbed higher, the dense jungle thinned out, revealing rugged mountains and crystal-clear lakes. When we finally reached Aguas Calientes, we hit a small snag with our hotel, but that's all part of the adventure, right? Stay tuned as we get one step closer to Machu Picchu. With our goodbyes said, we set off for the next leg of our journey. Our destination was Hydroelectrica, the starting point for our trek to Machu Picchu. We hailed a taxi, an old vehicle that had clearly seen better days. The paint was chipped, and the seats were worn, but it was functional, and that was all that mattered. We climbed in, our backpacks heavy on our shoulders, and began the drive. The road to Hydroelectrica was rough, to say the least. It was narrow and winding, carved into the side of the mountain, with steep drop-offs on one side. The surface was pitted with potholes, and sections of it were under construction, with loose gravel and dirt making the ride even bumpier. The taxi rattled and shook as it navigated the uneven terrain, but the driver seemed unfazed, expertly maneuvering the vehicle around the obstacles in our path. As we drove, the landscape around us changed. The dense jungle that had surrounded us in Aguas Calientes began to give way to more open terrain. We passed small villages, their houses made of stone and adobe, and saw farmers working in the fields, tending to their crops. The air was fresh and cool, filled with the scent of earth and vegetation. The mountains loomed all around us, their peaks shrouded in mist, adding to the sense of mystery and adventure. After about half an hour, we reached Hydroelectrica. It was little more than a small cluster of buildings, a few shops, and the start of a railway line. This was where the trek to Machu Picchu would begin. We paid the taxi driver, shouldered our backpacks, and set off on foot. The trek from Hydroelectrica to Aguas Calientes was more than just another step in our travel plans. It was the culmination of weeks of anticipation, meticulous planning, and an unshakable curiosity about the world's most iconic archaeological site, Machu Picchu. When we first set foot in Santa Teresa, the final town before Hydroelectrica, the energy of the place surged through us. It felt as though we were standing at the crossroads of history, where every step forward would take us deeper into the ancient heart of Peru. Before the trek began, we stood with our backpacks on, both weighed down physically and mentally by what lay ahead. Each backpack, laden with 12 kilograms of essentials, felt manageable at first. But there was an underlying awareness that 2 hours of walking through the rugged landscape would test our stamina. My husband adjusted his straps one last time and gave me a reassuring nod. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of our shared journey, our commitment to adventure, and to seeing the world through each other's eyes. Hydroelectrica itself was a small, unassuming starting point for such a monumental trek. The area was bustling with travelers like us, gearing up for the walk, each carrying their own stories and motivations. There was a palpable sense of camaraderie in the air, though most people were strangers. The clinking of metal tracks in the distance and the faint hum of conversations in multiple languages filled the background. It was as if everyone here understood that this walk was not just a physical journey, but a pilgrimage of sorts. Each person connected by the draw of the ancient Incan ruins ahead. As we finally took our first steps along the railway line, the excitement surged within me. The landscape, still somewhat familiar from the days leading up to this, began to shift almost immediately. Dense green jungle enveloped the path, and I knew we were stepping into a place of immense natural beauty and significance. From the moment we started, it was clear that this wasn't an ordinary hike. The path followed the railway line, but quickly became more than just a means to an end. Every turn in the trail revealed new layers of Peru's breathtaking landscape, each more stunning than the last. The greenery was thick and lush, with ferns, wild banana trees, and dense foliage stretching out on either side of us. The jungle seemed alive, teeming with the sounds of unseen birds and insects, their calls echoing through the humid air. The sheer beauty of the place enveloped us, as if the landscape itself was guiding us forward. I found myself captivated by the vibrant shades of green, each tree and plant appearing more alive than anything I'd ever seen. The thick jungle had an energy to it, as though the very earth was pulsing with life beneath our feet. The path we walked was relatively flat, yet the weight of our backpacks and the ever-present humidity made each step a reminder that this journey wouldn't be without its challenges. Every now and then, the dense trees would part, revealing glimpses of vast lakes that mirrored the sky. The sight of the water was mesmerizing. The surface shimmered like glass, reflecting the towering mountains and scattered clouds above, creating an almost surreal effect. It was as though the landscape was offering us moments of reflection, both literally and figuratively. A few kilometers down the path, we met a couple from France. They had been traveling through South America for months and were full of stories about their adventures. We exchanged travel tales, bonding over our shared love of exploration. There was a sense of camaraderie among us, despite our different backgrounds. The sight of these pristine lakes reminded me how untouched this part of the world felt, as though time itself had paused here, allowing nature to remain as it was meant to be. The wild banana trees along the path seemed to dance with the wind. Their broad, emerald green leaves rustled softly, creating a soothing backdrop to our walk. I couldn't resist running my hand along one of the leaves, feeling its smooth texture. It was a small moment, but one that grounded me in the present, a reminder of the simplicity and beauty of nature. As we ventured deeper into the trek, the distant sound of rushing water grew louder. Soon enough, the Urubamba River came into view, snaking its way alongside the path. The river was a powerful force, its waters flowing swiftly between towering cliffs and lush vegetation. It felt like a lifeline for the region, a reminder of the natural forces that had shaped this landscape long before humans ever set foot here. The Urubamba River wasn't just a beautiful feature of the landscape. It was steeped in history. The Incas had relied on this river for centuries, using its waters to sustain their agriculture and settlements. Walking beside it, I felt an unspoken connection to the ancient civilization that had once thrived here. It was humbling to think that we were following in their footsteps, treading the same ground that had been traversed by Incan pilgrims on their way to Machu Picchu. As the river roared beside us, I found myself reflecting on the power of nature and the ways it had shaped both the landscape and the people who lived here. The river's force was relentless, yet there was a calmness to its rhythm, a balance between power and tranquility. It reminded me of the duality of life, how beauty and strength can coexist harmoniously. We stopped for a moment to admire the river, letting its presence wash over us. We encountered a group of Germans, their cheerful banter filling the air as they trekked ahead of us. They were seasoned hikers, their movements confident and sure, but they greeted us warmly and shared tips about the trail ahead. We were all united by the same goal, to reach Machu Picchu and experience its magic firsthand. The cool breeze coming off the water was a welcome relief from the heat, and for a moment, all the fatigue from our trek seemed to disappear. Standing there, with the river at our side and the jungle surrounding us, I felt a deep sense of peace. It was as though we had become part of the landscape, absorbed into the rhythm of nature. We walked together for a while, sharing stories about our respective cultures, and marveling at the fact that we had all ended up in this remote corner of the world. Despite the beauty of the surroundings and the joy of meeting fellow travelers, the trek was not without its challenges. It was easy to imagine how the people who had lived here for centuries had found sustenance in the plants and fruits of this land. The wild banana trees that lined the path added an almost whimsical element to the trek. Their massive, heart-shaped leaves reached out like welcoming hands, guiding us forward. I marveled at their resilience, growing so abundantly in this rugged terrain. The air around us was thick with the scent of the jungle, earthy, sweet, and slightly tangy from the nearby river. Every now and then, a breeze would sweep through, carrying with it the fragrance of the wildflowers and the dampness of the riverbank. It was a sensory overload in the best possible way, as though the landscape was doing everything in its power to make us aware of its presence. As the trek continued, I couldn't help but feel a growing connection to the land. It wasn't just the physical beauty of the landscape, but something deeper, an almost spiritual connection that seemed to pull me further into the experience. The history of the Inca civilization weighed heavily on my mind, and I found myself imagining what it must have been like for them to walk these same paths centuries ago. There was a sense of timelessness here, as though the landscape hadn't changed at all since the days of the Incas. The mountains stood tall and unyielding, the jungle thrived with life, and the river continued its endless journey. It was humbling to think that we were merely passing through, while the land would remain long after we were gone. I thought about the Incas and their deep connection to nature. They had built their cities in harmony with the land, using its natural features to enhance their architecture and agriculture. Machu Picchu, the crown jewel of their empire, was a testament to their reverence for the natural world. As we walked, I felt that same reverence growing within me. One of the most rewarding aspects of the trek was the people we met along the way. There was a steady stream of travelers from all corners of the globe, each drawn to this place by a shared sense of wonder and adventure. Later, we crossed paths with an Indian traveler, his brightly colored clothing standing out against the muted tones of the jungle. He too was captivated by the beauty of the landscape and the history that surrounded us. The weight of our backpacks became more pronounced with each passing kilometer, and the sun, though softened by the canopy of trees overhead, still bore down on us, adding a layer of weariness to our journey. My shoulders began to ache from the strain, and each step became a conscious effort to push forward. The once manageable 12 kilograms now felt like an invisible force pulling us back with every step. I shifted the straps of my backpack, trying to distribute the weight more evenly, but it was clear that the trek, while flat, was going to test not only our endurance, but also our mental resilience. Every now and then, we would stop to rest, taking off our backpacks and stretching our tired muscles. These moments of reprieve, though brief, were much needed, and each time we rested, we found ourselves gazing at the breathtaking landscape around us. It was in these quiet moments that I truly appreciated the enormity of the experience. As we walked, I noticed a small cluster of wildflowers growing by the side of the path. Their vibrant colors, brilliant yellows, deep purples, and soft pinks, stood out against the backdrop of green. I couldn't resist kneeling down to take a closer look. The flowers were delicate, their petals soft to the touch. They seemed almost out of place in this harsh landscape, yet their beauty was undeniable. I decided to pick a few of the flowers, carefully pressing them between the pages of a book I had bought about the history of Peru. It was a small memento, but one that I hoped would remind me of this moment, this connection to the land and the journey we were on. The towering mountains that framed our journey seemed to watch over us, silent sentinels of the past and present. The physical fatigue was tempered by the knowledge that we were getting closer to Aguas Calientes with every step. The path, though long and challenging, was also a reminder of the privilege we had in experiencing this journey. We were walking in the footsteps of ancient pilgrims, treading the same route that had been used for centuries. This thought alone kept us moving forward, even when our legs screamed for a break, and the weight of the backpacks seemed unbearable. As we walked, the thought of Machu Picchu lingered in my mind like a distant dream. It was a place I had read about countless times, seen in photographs, and imagined visiting since childhood. Yet, now that we were so close, it felt more like a mystical destination than a physical one. The Incas had built Machu Picchu high in the Andes, hidden away from the world, and as I walked, I tried to imagine what it must have been like for them. For the Incas, nature was more than just a backdrop. It was a living entity, imbued with spiritual significance. The mountains, rivers, and forests were all sacred, and they believed that the gods inhabited these natural features. Machu Picchu itself was said to be a place of great spiritual energy, a connection between the earth and the heavens. This was not just a city, but a place where the Incas sought to understand the mysteries of the universe. Walking through the jungle, I could feel that same energy all around us. There was something almost magical about the landscape, as though it was alive with the spirits of the past. The air felt thick with history, and I could sense the weight of the centuries pressing down upon us. It was a humbling realization that we were not just tourists here, but participants in a much larger story that had been unfolding for thousands of years. As we neared Aguas Calientes, the anticipation grew. The town was the final stop before the ascent to Machu Picchu, and though we had not yet reached the ancient city, the journey had already been transformative. There was something about the trek itself, the physical challenge, the beauty of the landscape, and the connection to history, that made me feel as though we were already part of the legacy of this place. The last stretch of the path was a blur of excitement and exhaustion. We could hear the distant sounds of Aguas Calientes, a bustling town nestled in the shadow of Machu Picchu. As we drew closer, the jungle began to thin, and the sound of the river grew louder, signaling that we were near civilization once again. The feeling of finally reaching Aguas Calientes was one of relief and triumph. We had walked for hours, carrying our heavy backpacks and pushing through the fatigue, but now, standing at the edge of town, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. We had made it. The goal was within sight, and soon we would be standing in the presence of one of the greatest wonders of the world. The next day, we would rise before dawn to begin the final ascent to Machu Picchu. But for now, we allowed ourselves to rest and reflect. The path we had taken was more than just a trail through the jungle. It was a journey through time, a bridge between the past and the present. And as we prepared for the adventure that awaited us the next day, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to walk this ancient path, to be part of a story that had been written long before we ever set foot in Peru. With the weight of the trek still lingering in our muscles and the memories of the day fresh in our minds, we settled into Aguas Calientes, ready for what the next chapter of our adventure would bring. The journey from Hydroelectrica to Aguas Calientes had been more than just a physical challenge. It had been a journey of discovery, both of the land and of ourselves. The town itself seemed to be carved out of the mountainside, with steep hills on all sides and buildings perched precariously on every available patch of land. The river ran through the center, its waters rushing over rocks and boulders, creating a constant backdrop of sound that seemed to echo through the valley. Bridges connected different parts of the town, and everywhere you looked there were people, travelers like us, many of them wearing hiking boots and carrying large backpacks, all with the same goal of reaching Machu Picchu. We walked through the streets, searching for the hotel we had booked. The weight of the journey still hung over us, and we exchanged few words, instead focusing on navigating the winding, uneven cobblestone roads. Every now and then, we would stop to catch our breath or adjust our backpacks, our eyes drawn to the imposing mountains that loomed over the town, their peaks hidden in the clouds. It was as if the mountains were watching us, silently judging our resolve. When we finally arrived at the hotel, a wave of relief washed over me. It was a modest building, painted in soft pastel colors with a welcoming sign outside. Inside, the lobby was simple but cozy, with wooden furniture and large windows that offered a view of the river. The soothing sound of the rushing water was a stark contrast to the bustling streets just outside. I asked her to repeat herself, my heart racing slightly. This was the moment when we realized that something had gone terribly wrong. In our exhaustion, we had misinterpreted the details of our reservation. The woman had, in fact, quoted us not $47, but $470 for the night. It was an astronomical difference, a figure that was far beyond what we had anticipated, let alone budgeted for. For a moment, I was sure I had misunderstood. Surely it was a mistake. But as she confirmed the price once more, the reality of the situation began to sink in. We exchanged glances, my husband and I, the disbelief mirrored in our eyes. A mix of frustration, confusion, and sheer exhaustion washed over us. This wasn't just a miscommunication. It felt like a punch to the gut after such a long, challenging day. We had been looking forward to a warm shower, a comfortable bed, and a chance to relax after the grueling trek. And now we were faced with the possibility of being stranded without a place to stay. I could feel the exhaustion weighing down on me even more. The thought of having to start the search for a new hotel at this late hour almost unbearable. But we couldn't justify paying such a high price for one night, no matter how appealing the idea of sinking into a soft bed sounded. We had no choice but to decline the room. We stood outside the hotel for a while, gathering our thoughts. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the town. The light caught the red-tiled roofs of the buildings, making them seem to glow from within, while the mountains took on deep shades of purple and blue, their outlines softened by the approaching twilight. There was a serenity to the scene, and despite the frustration of the situation, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the beauty that surrounded us. With no choice but to move forward, we started down the narrow streets again, hoping to find a place that would fit within our budget. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of our backpacks pulling us down, but we pressed on. As we passed by small guest houses and hostels, I realized that this was part of the journey. The unexpected challenges, the moments of uncertainty, and the need to adapt when things didn't go as planned. Thanks for being part of this amazing journey with us. The adventure doesn't stop here. We've got so much more coming your way. Stay tuned for our next exciting chapter, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to join us on our next stop.